Subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab. Now let's begin. Keith Rice's phone buzzed on the conference room table. Flight 2847 to Columbus. Cancelled. Mechanical issues. The automated message suggested rebooking for Sunday afternoon. He stared at the screen, jaw tightening. Sunday meant missing Emma's championship soccer game. He'd already missed 3 this season. The logistics conference in Chicago had been mandatory. 3 days of supply chain optimization seminars and networking dinners that tasted like cardboard. Keith had spent 12 years coordinating freight routes for Midwest Transport Solutions, moving everything from automotive parts to agricultural equipment across 6 states. He was good at finding efficient paths, at solving problems others couldn't see. But right now, the only route that mattered was home. He opened the Maps app. 4 hours and 17 minutes by car. He could be home by 1 in the morning if he left now. Keith gathered his papers, nodded to the presenter still droning about just-in-time delivery systems, and slipped out. The rental sedan handled better than he expected as he merged onto I-90 eastbound. Keith kept the radio off, preferring silence for thinking. Maureen had been distant lately. Not hostile, just absent. They'd met 13 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. She'd been quiet, thoughtful, with eyes that seemed to hold old secrets. He'd fallen for that depth, mistaking trauma for mystery. They married within a year. Emma arrived 2 years later. The pregnancy had changed Maureen. She'd grown protective to the point of paranoia, hovering over Emma's crib, checking locks 3 times before bed. Keith attributed it to new mother anxiety. Everyone said it would pass. It hadn't. As Emma grew, Maureen's rules multiplied. No sleepovers. No unsupervised playtime. Emma couldn't even walk to the neighbor's house alone. Keith had pushed back, arguing Emma needed independence. Those conversations always ended the same way. Maureen shutting down, retreating to the bedroom, emerging hours later with red-rimmed eyes. The highway stretched dark and empty. Keith's mind drifted to last month's argument. Emma had asked to join the Girl Scouts. Maureen had said no without explanation. Keith had overridden her for the first time in their marriage. Emma had been so happy, bouncing around the kitchen in her new uniform. Maureen had watched from the doorway, expression unreadable. Headlights flashed past. Keith checked the time, 12:47 a.m. Almost home. He took the exit for their subdivision, the familiar streets of suburban Columbus appearing under yellow street lamps. Their house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a modest 2-story colonial with blue shutters Emma had helped him paint last summer. The porch light was off. Keith frowned. Maureen always left it on when he traveled. He used his key quietly, not wanting to wake anyone. The living room lay dark and still. Keith set his bag down and climbed the stairs, muscle memory guiding him past the family photos lining the wall. Emma's room was at the end of the hall, door slightly ajar as always. She was afraid of the dark. Keith pushed the door open. The night light glowed near the baseboards, illuminating an empty bed. Made up tight, hospital corners. Emma never made her bed. His heart rate kicked up. Keith checked the bathroom, his home office, even the hall closet where Emma sometimes hid during hide-and-seek. Nothing. He moved faster now, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Maureen's bedroom door was closed. They'd been sleeping separately for 6 months. Another thing Keith told himself was temporary. He knocked once, then entered. Maureen sat up, squinting. "Keith? What are you doing here? Where's Emma?" "What?" Maureen's voice was thick with sleep. Or maybe something else. "Emma. She's not in her room." "Where is she?" Maureen turned on the bedside lamp. Her face looked drawn, older than her 37 years. "She's at Grandma's." "I told you. You didn't tell me anything. I sent you a text. Thursday morning." Maureen reached for her phone, made a show of scrolling. "See?" Keith looked at his phone. "No message." "Show me." Maureen's hand trembled slightly as she held out her screen. The message was there, time-stamped Thursday 9:14 a.m. Emma's staying with Mom this weekend. She wanted to visit. But Keith had never received it. He checked his messages again. Nothing. Why would she want to stay over on a school night? It's not a school night. Monday's a teacher in-service day, remember? Maureen's voice had an edge now. You'd know that if you were around more. Keith did remember. Emma had mentioned it. But still, which grandma? Mine or yours? Maureen hesitated. Just a beat, but Keith caught it. Mine. Sue and Willie's house. Yes. Keith pulled out his phone and dialed his mother. It rang 4 times before her sleepy voice answered. Keith? What's wrong? Is Emma with you? Emma? No, honey. Why would she be here at 1 in the morning? Sorry, Mom. Wrong number mix-up. Go back to sleep. Keith ended the call and stared at Maureen. When did you take her to your parents? Yesterday after school. They picked her up. Without asking me. I'm her mother. I don't need permission. Something was very wrong. Keith felt it in his gut, the same instinct that helped him spot routing problems before they cascaded into disasters. I'm going to pick her up. Now? Keith, it's almost 2 in the morning. You'll wake everyone up. Then I'll wake everyone up. He was already moving, grabbing his keys. Maureen called after him. You're being paranoid. This is exactly why I don't tell you things. Keith didn't respond. He was already out the door, engine starting, pulling out of the driveway. The Riggs house was in Glendale, a neighboring suburb 30 minutes north. Willie and Sue lived in a sprawling ranch-style home with a detached garage out back. Keith had always found the place unsettling. Too many locked doors. Too many rooms kept off limits. He'd met Maureen's parents at Christmas 11 years ago, shortly after proposing. Willie Riggs was a retired postal worker, tall and barrel-chested with a mechanical smile that never reached his eyes. Sue was thin and watchful, always positioned where she could see every exit. They'd been polite enough, but Keith sensed something underneath. A current of wrongness he couldn't name. Maureen rarely spoke about her childhood. The few times Keith had asked, she'd deflected. Normal, she'd say. Nothing special. But normal people didn't flinch when you raised your voice. Normal people didn't check locks compulsively. Keith had visited the Riggs house maybe a dozen times over the years, always for mandatory holidays. The visits were strained, conversation stilted. Emma had never seemed comfortable there, always staying close to Keith, always quiet. He'd assumed it was shyness around relatives she didn't see often. Assumed. Keith's hands tightened on the wheel. The streets grew darker as he left the main roads, winding through older neighborhoods where houses sat far apart. The Riggs property appeared ahead, set back from the road behind a line of pine trees. Most of the house was dark, but Keith spotted a light in the detached garage at the back of the property. He parked on the street and approached on foot. The front door was locked, porch light off. Keith knocked, waited. No response. He knocked harder, rang the doorbell. Nothing. Keith circled around the side of the house, moving through the shadow of the pines. The backyard opened up, revealing the garage about 50 feet from the main house. It was old, probably built in the 60s, with small windows set high in the walls. Light leaked from under the main door. Keith's pulse hammered in his ears as he crossed the lawn. The garage had a side entrance, just a basic knob lock. He tried it. Unlocked. The door swung inward silently, and Keith stepped into hell. Emma stood on a wooden stool in the center of the garage, her small frame trembling with exhaustion. Her arms were stretched above her head, wrists bound with zip ties to a rope looped over an exposed ceiling beam. She wore her pink pajamas, the ones with the unicorns. Her feet were bare. Tear tracks stained her cheeks. Keith's vision tunneled. He crossed the garage in 3 strides, grabbing a utility knife from Willie's workbench. Emma, baby, I've got you. Emma's eyes opened. She'd been barely conscious, swaying. Daddy, I'm here. Hold still. Keith cut through the rope above her wrists, caught her as she collapsed. Her arms flopped uselessly, circulation cut off. Keith cradled her against his chest, feeling her whole body shake. How long? His voice came out hoarse. Since. Emma's lips were cracked, voice barely a whisper. Since 8. Grandma said I had to stay until morning. For lying. 6 hours. His 9-year-old daughter had been tortured for 6 hours. Keith's hands trembled as he rubbed her arms, trying to restore circulation. What did you supposedly lie about? I told her. I wanted to go home. She said that was a lie, that I was happy here. Keith looked around the garage with new eyes. This wasn't improvised. The beam had eye hooks screwed into it at regular intervals. The rope was neatly coiled on a shelf, ready for use. How many times had they done this? Emma's fingers twitched as feeling returned. She grabbed Keith's shirt. Daddy, check Grandpa's car. The trunk. Keith glanced at Willie's sedan parked on the other side of the garage. Why? I saw, when they brought me out here. Grandma was putting something in it. A metal box. She didn't know I saw. Emma's voice dropped even lower. I think there are pictures of me. Everything stopped. The garage, the world, Keith's heart. Pictures? Emma nodded against his chest. Grandma takes them sometimes. With her camera. She tells me it's normal. That all grandmas do it. Keith had spent 12 years optimizing routes, finding efficiencies, solving problems. Every instinct he'd honed told him to take Emma and run. Get her to a hospital, call the police, let the system handle it. But another part of him, a part he'd kept buried since leaving the army 15 years ago, knew exactly what he was going to do. Can you walk? He asked Emma. She nodded. Keith helped her stand, supporting most of her weight. They made it to his car together. He set her in the passenger seat, turned the heat on high, and gave her his water bottle. Drink slowly. I'll be right back. Where are you going? To check Grandpa's car. Lock the doors. If anyone comes out of the house, you honk the horn, and I'll come running. Understand? Emma nodded, her small hand already reaching for the lock button. Keith crossed the garage again, moving with purpose now. Willie's Buick was unlocked. Keith popped the trunk. Inside, beneath a spare tire and some emergency supplies, sat a gray metal case about the size of a tackle box. It had a combination lock. Keith grabbed a crowbar from the workbench and wedged it under the latch. The lock broke with a sharp crack. Keith opened the case. His hands went numb. SD cards. At least 20 of them, each labeled with dates going back years. External hard drives. Manila folders thick with documents. And photographs. Dozens of photographs, printed on photo paper, sorted into clear sleeves. Keith made himself look at one photograph. Just one. Emma, maybe 6 years old, in this garage. Posed in ways no child should be posed. He closed the folder before he could see more, before the rage building in his chest could explode into something he couldn't control. He needed control. He needed to think. Keith pulled out his phone and photographed everything in the case. Every SD card label, every folder, every visible document. Then he photographed the garage itself, the beam with its eye hooks, the stool, the rope on the shelf. The main house lights blazed on. Keith grabbed the entire metal case and ran for his car. Behind him, the garage door to the house flew open. Willie Riggs stood silhouetted in the doorway, wearing pajama bottoms and an undershirt, his face twisted in rage. Keith, what the hell are you? Willie's eyes landed on the case in Keith's hands. His expression changed. Put that down. Stay back. Keith kept moving toward his car, where Emma watched wide-eyed through the window. Willie charged. For a man in his 60s, he moved fast, crossing the garage in seconds. Keith turned sideways, let Willie's momentum carry him past, then swung the metal case into Willie's solar plexus. The older man went down gasping. Sue appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Willie, what's happening? Keith stood over Willie, who was trying to catch his breath. You tortured my daughter. For 6 hours. We were disciplining. Shut up. Keith's voice came out flat, cold. This isn't discipline. This is systematic abuse. And whatever's in this case, it's evidence of something much worse. Willie struggled to his knees. You don't understand. Maureen knows. She was raised the same way. She turned out fine. The world tilted. Keith looked at Sue, saw confirmation in her expression. Maureen knows. Of course she knows, Sue said. She's my daughter. This is how we do things in our family. How we've always done things. Keith thought of Maureen's evasions, her overprotectiveness, her need to control. The pieces rearranged themselves into a picture he'd been refusing to see. He pointed at Willie. Don't leave town. Don't call the police. Don't even think about running. Or what? Willie had found his breath, along with some bravado. Keith smiled then, and it was his old army smile, the one that used to make insurgents reconsider their life choices. Or I'll do to you what you did to my daughter. Except I won't stop after 6 hours. He got in his car, put the case in the back seat, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, he saw Sue helping Willie to his feet, both of them watching him go. Where are we going? Emma asked, her voice small. Hospital first. Then home. What about Grandma and Grandpa? Keith reached over and took her hand. Don't worry about them, sweetheart. Daddy's going to handle everything. Emma was silent for a moment. Then, are you going to call the police? Keith thought about the case in the back seat, the magnitude of what it likely contained, and the revenge already forming in his mind. Eventually. But first, I'm going to make sure they can never hurt you again. Or anyone else. The hospital emergency room at 2:30 a.m. was nearly empty. Keith carried Emma inside, the metal case hidden under a blanket in the car. He told the nurse on duty that his daughter had been restrained against her will, showed the marks on her wrists, described the 6 hours on the stool. The nurse's expression hardened. She called for a doctor immediately. Dr. Sean Thomas was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes that turned furious as he examined Emma. He documented everything. The ligature marks, the dehydration, the muscle damage in her shoulders from prolonged elevation. He took photographs, asked gentle questions, and ordered blood work. Mr. Rice, Dr. Thomas said quietly while Emma was getting in for. I'm required by law to report suspected child abuse. I know. Do it. Who did this to her? Keith hesitated. Then, her grandparents. My wife's parents. Dr. Thomas's pen paused over his tablet. Your wife knew. I'm still determining that. Keith's voice was flat. But I have reason to believe she did. The doctor nodded slowly. CPS will be contacted. Police too. This level of abuse, it's criminal. Good. Keith meant it. He wanted reports filed. A paper trail started. But he also knew the system was slow. Investigations took time. Prosecutions took longer. And in that time, evidence disappeared, witnesses were intimidated, perpetrators walked free. Keith had different plans. Emma was admitted for observation. They gave her a private room, pain medication, fluids. Keith sat beside her bed as she finally slept, her small chest rising and falling steadily. He pulled out his phone and started going through the photographs he'd taken of the case's contents. The SD card's labels were dates and initials. Some initials he recognized. ER for Emma Rice. Others he didn't. KP, BW, TG. How many children? How long had this been going on? The documents were harder to photograph clearly, but Keith could make out enough. Names, addresses, what looked like schedules. Bank account numbers. Email addresses. This wasn't just Willie and Sue. This was organized. Keith opened his laptop and began building a spreadsheet. Every piece of information he could glean from his photos went into it. Names, dates, locations. Patterns emerged. Multiple people were involved. Meetings were scheduled. Money changed hands. His phone rang at 5 a.m. Maureen. Keith, what did you do? Mom just called me, hysterical. She says you attacked Dad and kidnapped Emma. Keith walked out into the hospital corridor before answering, keeping his voice low. I found her, Maureen, tied to a beam in their garage. She'd been there for 6 hours. Silence. Then, that's not. Mom said Emma was being punished for misbehaving. She was 9 years old, hanging from a ceiling beam. Her circulation was cut off. She's in the hospital. The hospital? Keith, you're overreacting. A little discipline never. Stop. Keith's voice cut like a blade. I found their case. The photographs. The SD cards. I know what they've been doing. And I know you knew about it. More silence. When Maureen spoke again, her voice was different. Hello. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. It's complicated. It's how I was raised. It's family. You can't just. Your parents have been sexually abusing Emma. Photographing her. Based on what I found, I think they've been doing it to other children too. Maybe for decades. Keith's hands shook. And you knew. You helped them. You sent her there. No. I would never. You sent her there every month. Sometimes more. You always had an excuse why I couldn't come along. You were protecting them, not her. He could hear Maureen crying. You don't know what it's like. What they did to me. What they threatened. They said if I didn't cooperate, if I didn't give them access to Emma, they'd come after her anyway. At least this way I could control it, minimize it. Keith closed his eyes. Part of him wanted to understand, to find compassion for the broken woman his wife had become. But a larger part of him, the part that had just watched his daughter sleep off torture, felt nothing but ice. You had a choice, he said. Every time you handed Emma over to them, you had a choice. You chose them. Keith, please. We can work through this. Family therapy, we can. I'm filing for divorce. And full custody. If you contest it, I'll make sure every single thing I found in that case becomes public record. Do you understand me? You can't. Keith, please. I'm still her mother. You lost that right when you fed her to predators. Keith ended the call. He stood in the empty corridor, hands pressed against the cold wall, breathing hard. The rage was still there, coiling in his chest like a living thing. But underneath it was something colder, more patient. A plan taking shape. When he returned to Emma's room, a woman in a blazer was waiting. She introduced herself as Cheryl Dickerson, Child Protective Services. They talked for an hour. Keith showed her the photographs from the hospital of Emma's injuries, told her about finding Emma in the garage, explained what he'd discovered in the case. He didn't give her the case itself. Not yet. He told her it was locked in his car, that he'd bring it to the police station later that morning. Cheryl listened, took notes, her expression growing darker. Mr. Rice, I need to be clear. If what you're telling me is accurate, this is one of the most serious cases I've encountered. We'll be opening an immediate investigation. Your in-laws will be interviewed. Your wife too. Good. I also need to inform you that based on the severity of the allegations and your wife's potential involvement, Emma cannot return to your current home. Keith had expected this. I have an alternative. My parents live in Cincinnati. They're retired, background checked, and they've never met Willie or Sue Riggs. Emma knows them well, and she's comfortable there. Cheryl nodded. That's acceptable, pending verification. We'll need to inspect their home, interview them. Standard procedure. Whatever you need. After Cheryl left, Keith called his parents. His mother, Janet, answered on the first ring. She'd been awake, worried since his cryptic 1 a.m. call. Keith told her everything. When he finished, his mother was crying. His father, Philip, got on the line. Bring her here. Now. Today. CPS needs to approve it first. Then we'll pass their inspection. Keith. His father's voice broke. That poor baby. How could anyone? I know, Dad. I know. By noon, Emma was discharged. CPS had fast-tracked the approval for Keith's parents. Keith drove south toward Cincinnati, Emma sleeping in the passenger seat, the metal case hidden in the trunk. His parents lived in a quiet suburb, a modest house where Keith had grown up. They were waiting on the porch when he arrived. His mother swept Emma into a careful hug, mindful of her injuries. His father gripped Keith's shoulder hard. How long will she stay? Janet asked. As long as needed. Could be weeks. Could be months. We don't mind. She's our granddaughter. Janet led Emma inside, already talking about making her favorite cookies. Keith's father walked him back to the car. What are you going to do? What needs to be done? Keith, I know that look. I wore the same expression when I came back from Vietnam. Don't do anything that'll separate you from her permanently. I won't. Keith met his father's eyes. But I can't let them walk away from this. The system's too slow, too lenient. They'll get lawyers, plea bargains. They'll serve a few years at most, then get out and do it all over again. So what's your plan? Keith pulled out his phone, showed his father the photographs of the case's contents. This isn't just Willie and Sue. It's a network. Multiple perpetrators, multiple victims, going back years. Maybe decades. I'm going to dismantle it. All of it. How? The same way I optimize freight routes. Find the weak points, apply pressure, make the whole system collapse. Keith closed his phone. Willie and Sue are going to pay. But so is everyone else in their network. And Maureen. She's going to have to choose whose side she's really on. His father studied him for a long moment. Your mother and I, we didn't raise you to be vengeful. No. You raised me to protect people who can't protect themselves. Keith climbed into his car. That's exactly what I'm doing. He drove back to Columbus as the sun set, his mind already working through the logistics. The case sat in his trunk, containing enough evidence to destroy lives. But Keith needed more than destruction. He needed justice. Real justice, not the watered-down version courts dispensed. First stop, home. The house was empty, Maureen's things still there, but Maureen herself gone. Keith didn't care where. He took the metal case to his home office and locked the door. Then he began the real work. He uploaded every SD card to his laptop, though he could barely stomach looking at the contents. Each card contained hundreds of files. Images, videos. Different children across different years. Keith forced himself to document it all, creating a database. The pattern became clear. 8 children besides Emma, current or recent. Dozens more going back 20 years. Some of the older victims would be adults now, in their 20s or 30s. Had they escaped? Were they even alive? The documents were more revealing. Names and addresses of 5 other couples involved. Meeting schedules, always rotating houses. Financial records showing payments between members. Email chains discussing merchandise and acquisitions. Keith recognized one name immediately, Bernard Meadows. The same Bernard Meadows who ran the youth ministry at Cornerstone Fellowship Church, where half the town sent their kids. Another name, Lance Wilkinson. He coached Little League Baseball and ran a youth sports complex. These people had positioned themselves with access to children. Deliberately. Systematically. Keith's hands clenched on his desk. He wanted to drive to each address immediately, to drag these people into the light. But that would be reactive, sloppy. He needed a plan. He opened a new document and began typing. 3 columns. Name, weakness, leverage. For the next 8 hours, Keith researched. He used paid databases, social media, public records. He built profiles on each perpetrator. Bernard Meadows had a gambling problem, heavily in debt. Lance Wilkinson was married with kids of his own. What would his wife say if she knew? Robbie Berger, Sue's sister, was a retired school nurse with a pristine reputation. Each person had something to lose. Keith just needed to figure out how to make them lose it in the most devastating way possible. Around 3 a.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Keith answered. Mr. Rice? This is Kathleen Pike. Cheryl Dickerson gave me your number. She thought maybe we should talk. Who are you? I'm someone your in-laws heard a long time ago. I'm a survivor. A pause. Cheryl mentioned you were investigating. That you'd found evidence. I wanted you to know that you're not alone in this. And if you need someone who understands what they've done, what they're capable of, I'm here. Keith leaned back in his chair. How long ago? I was with them from age 8 to 16. Sue and Willie specifically. They were the ones who got me into the network. I escaped when I was 16, ran away, lived on the streets for a year before child services found me. I've been in therapy ever since. Did you ever report them? Of course. Multiple times. But I had no proof. It was my word against theirs, and they had alibis for everything. The investigation went nowhere. Bitter laughter. They're very good at what they do. Not anymore. Keith's voice was hard. I have proof. SD cards full of it. Documents, financial records, communications. Everything. Kathleen's breath caught. Everything. Yes. Then nail them. Please. For me. For Emma. For everyone they've touched. I will. But I need to ask you something. Do you have any evidence from when you were with them? Anything they might not know you kept? Silence. Then, yes. I kept a diary. Names, dates, things they made me do, places they took me. I even have some photographs I managed to hide. I've been too scared to come forward with it. I thought no one would believe me. I believe you. And with what I have plus what you have, we can bury them. What do you need me to do? Keith thought carefully. For now, nothing. Keep your evidence safe. I'm going to do some things that might seem unorthodox. But when the time comes, I'll need you to be ready to testify. I will. Mr. Rice, thank you. For believing your daughter. For fighting for her. My parents never did. After hanging up, Keith felt a strange calm settle over him. He wasn't alone in this. There were other victims, other survivors. And together, they had something these predators had never faced before, someone willing to fight back. Keith spent the rest of the night planning. Not just evidence gathering, but psychological warfare. He would make these people turn on each other, destroy their network from within, and ensure that even if the legal system failed, they would never be able to hurt another child. By the time the sun rose, Keith Rice had a plan. And Willie Riggs, Sue Riggs, Bernard Meadows, Lance Wilkinson, and every other member of their sick network were about to learn what happened when someone finally fought back. The war had begun. 3 days later, Keith sat in a coffee shop across from Kathleen Pike. She was 34, but looked older, with wary eyes and hands that never stayed still. She'd brought a worn notebook and a shoebox full of photographs. I've been carrying these around for 18 years, Kathleen said, pushing the box across the table. Part of me wanted to burn them. Part of me knew I might need them someday. Keith opened the box carefully. The photographs were old, pre-digital era prints. They showed a young Kathleen at various ages, always in positions that made Keith's stomach turn. But more importantly, they showed faces. Willie and Sue Riggs, younger but recognizable. Bernard Meadows with less gray hair. A woman Keith didn't know. That's Robbie Berger, Kathleen said, pointing to the unknown woman. Sue's sister. She was involved from the beginning. There were others too, but these 3 were the core. Keith photographed each picture with his phone, building his evidence file. Your diary, can I see it? Kathleen hesitated, then handed over the worn notebook. Keith flipped through pages of cramped handwriting, dates and descriptions that made him want to put his fist through a wall. But buried in the horror were names, addresses, specific dates that could be cross-referenced with the documents he'd found. This is incredible, Kathleen. This corroborates everything I have and fills in gaps going back decades. Will it be enough? For court. Keith met her eyes. I'm not sure I'm going to court. Not yet. What do you mean? The legal system is designed to protect the accused. That's normally a good thing. But in cases like this, Keith shook his head. They'll get good lawyers. They'll argue about chain of custody, admissibility, statute of limitations. Some of them might walk. And even if they're convicted, they'll serve soft time in protective custody because prisons don't like child predators. They'll be out in 5, 10 years. So what are you going to do? Keith pulled out his laptop and showed her the spreadsheet he'd built. Names, addresses, known associates, vulnerabilities. I'm going to make them destroy each other. Create chaos, paranoia, distrust. Make them think the walls are closing in from every direction. And when they're at their weakest, when they've turned on each other and burned all their bridges, then I'll hand everything to the FBI and let them pick up the pieces. Kathleen studied the spreadsheet, a slow smile spreading across her face. You're going to make them suffer first. Yes. Good. They deserve it. She pulled out her phone. I can help. I know things about them, private things. Fears, insecurities. Information they thought died with me when they thought I'd never talk. For the next 3 hours, they planned. Kathleen provided insights into each perpetrator's psychology. Bernard Meadows was paranoid, convinced everyone was watching him. Lance Wilkinson was arrogant, believed he was untouchable. Willie Riggs had a temper that made him violent when cornered. Sue was the calculator, the planner, but she was also proud. She hated being outsmarted. Keith's plan began to take real shape. Phase 1 would create suspicion within the network. Phase 2 would turn that suspicion into open conflict. Phase 3 would be the takedown, using the evidence to ensure they all went down together. When do we start? Kathleen asked. Tonight. Keith closed his laptop. I'm going to send each of them a package. Nothing explicit, just enough to make them nervous. A few photographs of themselves, recent surveillance shots. A list of dates that correspond to their meetings. No return address, no explanation. They'll panic. Exactly. And panic makes people sloppy. That evening, Keith assembled 6 packages. Each one contained a USB drive with select photographs of the recipient. Nothing illegal, just surveillance shots proving someone was watching. He included a typed note. We know what you've done. Make it right, or everyone will know too. The packages went into the mail that night, sent from different post offices around the city to avoid a pattern. Then Keith waited. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, Bernard Meadows closed his church youth program, temporarily due to personal issues. Day 3, Lance Wilkinson's wife filed for divorce. Lance must have confessed something in his panic. Day 4, Sue Riggs called Keith's phone. He didn't answer. Day 5, Willie Riggs showed up at Keith's house. Keith had been expecting this. He opened the door to find his father-in-law on the porch, unshaven and wild-eyed. What did you send us? I don't know what you're talking about. Bullshit. You took our case, you threatened us, and now someone's been watching our house. Taking pictures. Sue got a package. So did Bernard. This is you. Keith leaned against the doorframe, casual. If someone's investigating you, maybe you should ask yourself why. Willie's hand shot out, grabbing Keith's shirt. You listen to me. Whatever you think you know, you're wrong. And if you go to the police with that case, I'll tell them you tampered with evidence. That you planted half of it. Your word against mine. Keith smiled. Go ahead. Try it. See how that works out for you when Kathleen Pike testifies. Willie's face went white. Kathleen? She doesn't. She remembers everything. And she kept records. Your network's finished, Willie. The only question is how painful you want the ending to be. Willie released Keith's shirt, stumbling back. We can make a deal. Money. We have money. Or we can disappear. Leave the country. You'll never hear from us again. You can't run far enough. Keith's voice was ice. I've already sent copies of everything to the FBI, to 3 different news organizations, and to a private investigator who has instructions to release it all if anything happens to me or Emma. You're trapped. Then what do you want? This was the moment Keith had been planning for. I want you to turn on your friends. I want every name, every location, every detail of your network. You give me that, and I'll consider letting you plead guilty to lesser charges. You can't offer me a plea. You're not a prosecutor. No. But I can make sure the evidence against you is airtight, or I can make sure it's questionable. Your choice. Willie's jaw worked. If I rat them out, they'll kill me in prison. Should have thought of that before you hurt my daughter. Willie turned and walked away, shoulders slumped. Keith watched him go, feeling no satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Over the next week, the network began to fracture. Bernard Meadows went to the police, trying to cut a deal before anyone else could. He confessed to minor offenses, but blamed Willie and Sue for the worst of it. The police, unprepared for such a confession, began an investigation. Lance Wilkinson vanished. Keith tracked him through credit card records. He'd driven to his brother's cabin in West Virginia. Keith sent a package there too. Robbie Berger, Sue's sister, showed up at Keith's house next. Unlike Willie, she came armed. She pulled a gun from her purse as soon as Keith opened the door. "You've destroyed everything," she hissed. "Bernard's talking, Lance is hiding, Willie's having a breakdown. This is your fault." Keith didn't move, keeping his hands visible. "The only people at fault are the ones who hurt children. We loved those children. We cared for them. You tortured them, abused them, sold them to each other like property." Robbie's hand trembled, the gun wavering. "I should kill you right now. You could try, but there's a dash cam in that car across the street recording this conversation. And if I don't check in with my lawyer in the next 10 minutes, every piece of evidence I have goes straight to the FBI." Keith had no lawyer, and the car across the street was empty, but Robbie didn't know that. "So shoot me if you want, but you'll spend the rest of your life in prison anyway." Robbie lowered the gun slowly. Tears streaked her face. "What do you want from us?" "I want you to suffer like you made those children suffer. I want you to lose everything. Your freedom, your reputation, your family, your money. I want you to spend every day for the rest of your life knowing what you did and facing the consequences." "That's cruel." Keith's laugh was harsh. "You tied my 9-year-old daughter to a ceiling beam for 6 hours. You photographed her, violated her, broke her trust. And you're calling me cruel?" Robbie put the gun back in her purse. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." After she left, Keith called Cheryl Dickerson at CPS. "Robbie Berger just threatened me with a gun. I'm filing a police report." Cheryl's voice was tight. "We've been getting information about a larger investigation. Bernard Meadows made some kind of confession. Is this connected to Emma's case?" "Yes, and it's bigger than you think. I have evidence of a network of child abusers operating in this area for at least 20 years. Multiple perpetrators, multiple victims. I'm ready to turn everything over to the proper authorities, but I want guarantees." "What kind of guarantees?" "I want witness protection for Emma. I want immunity for Kathleen Pike. She's a victim, not a perpetrator. And I want every single person in this network prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. No plea bargains, no reduced sentences." "Mr. Rice, I can't promise all of that. The FBI handles." "Then get me to the FBI. Today." 6 hours later, Keith sat in an FBI field office with Special Agent Ernest Carroll and Assistant U.S. Attorney Dustin Day. He brought his laptop, the metal case, and Kathleen Pike's evidence. For 3 hours, he walked them through everything he'd found. The SD cards, the documents, the financial records, the emails, Kathleen's testimony and diary, the surveillance he'd done on each perpetrator, the packages he'd sent to create paranoia. Agent Carroll leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Rice, what you've done is impressive and also highly illegal. You've broken into a vehicle, stolen evidence, conducted unauthorized surveillance, and engaged in what amounts to extortion. Are you going to arrest me?" "I should. But frankly, you've handed us the most comprehensive child abuse network case I've seen in 20 years. We've been investigating Bernard Meadows for months with nothing to show for it. You gave us everything in a week." Attorney Day spoke up. "We can't ignore the methods, but we can work around them. The evidence you took from Willie Riggs's vehicle, we can argue exigent circumstances. You believed your daughter was in immediate danger. The surveillance is grayer, but we can probably justify it as private investigation. The packages you sent are the real problem. They were just photographs and a note. I didn't threaten violence or demand money. It's still intimidation with intent to influence potential witnesses." Day drummed his fingers on the table. "But if you agree to cooperate fully with our investigation and cease any further contact with the suspects, I think we can avoid charging you." "What about Emma? And Kathleen?" "Witness protection for Emma, yes. We can arrange that. Kathleen." Agent Carroll looked at his notes. "She's a victim and witness, not a perpetrator. She'll be fine. We'll need her testimony. And prosecutions? We'll prosecute everyone we can. But I need you to understand, Mr. Rice, that trials take time. Appeals take longer. Some of these people might die before they see the inside of a courtroom. That's the reality of the justice system." Keith had expected this answer. It was why he'd spent the last 2 weeks dismantling their network himself. Even if some of them escaped prison, they'd lost everything else: reputations, families, peace of mind. I understand. What do you need from me? Everything. Every file, every document, every piece of evidence. And your testimony about how you found it, what you saw, what Emma told you. Keith handed over the metal case. It's yours. All of it. The investigation moved quickly after that. With Bernard Meadows already talking and the mountain of evidence Keith provided, the FBI built cases against all 6 core network members. Willie and Sue Riggs, Bernard Meadows, Lance Wilkinson, Robbie Berger, and 2 others Keith hadn't known about, Philip Knowles and Sonia Davidson. Arrests were made over a 3-day period. News cameras captured Willie being let out in handcuffs, Sue screaming about her rights, Bernard weeping. The story exploded across local and national media. Keith kept Emma in Cincinnati, shielded from the circus. He drove down every weekend to see her, watched her slowly come back to herself. She was in therapy, working through trauma, but she smiled more now, laughed occasionally, started sleeping through the night. Maureen tried to call repeatedly. Keith never answered. She sent letters that Keith burned without reading. Finally, her lawyer contacted his lawyer. She wanted shared custody. Keith's response was simple: over my dead body. The divorce was finalized within 2 months. Keith got full custody, sole decision-making authority, and a restraining order keeping Maureen away from Emma. Maureen didn't fight it. She couldn't, not with her own involvement in question. The trials began 6 months after the arrests. Keith testified at Willie and Sue's trial, describing finding Emma in the garage. Kathleen testified next, her voice steady as she recounted 8 years of abuse. 3 other adult victims came forward, their testimony corroborating the pattern. The SD cards and documents were entered into evidence. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Willie Riggs, life without parole. Sue Riggs, life without parole. Bernard Meadows, 45 years. Lance Wilkinson, 40 years. Robbie Berger, 40 years. Philip Knowles and Sonia Davidson, 35 years each. Maureen was charged with child endangerment and obstruction. She pleaded guilty and got 12 years. Keith sat in the courtroom as each sentence was read, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no relief. Just emptiness. Emma was safe. The network was destroyed. Justice had been served. But the scars remained. That night, he drove to Cincinnati to see Emma. She was playing in the backyard with Keith's parents, kicking a soccer ball around. She saw Keith and ran over, throwing her arms around him. "Daddy, Grandma says you won." "I didn't win, sweetheart. We just made sure the bad people can't hurt anyone anymore." "That sounds like winning to me." Emma looked up at him with clear eyes. "Grandpa's been teaching me self-defense. He says every girl should know how to protect herself." Keith glanced at his father, who shrugged. She asked, "I figured it was a good idea. Can you teach me too, Daddy?" Emma asked, "I want to be strong like you." Keith knelt down to her level. "You're already strong, Emma. Stronger than you know. But yes, I'll teach you. Whatever you want to learn." She hugged him again, fierce and tight. "I love you, Daddy. Thank you for saving me. I'll always save you. Always." That night, after Emma was asleep, Keith sat on his parents' back porch with his father. They didn't talk, just shared the silence and the stars. Finally, his father spoke. "Are you satisfied with how it ended?" Keith considered. Willie and Sue would die in prison. The others would spend decades behind bars. The network was destroyed, evidence made public, other victims empowered to come forward. Maureen had lost everything, but Emma still had nightmares. Kathleen still carried trauma 2 decades later. Dozens of children had been hurt, damaged in ways that might never fully heal. The victory felt hollow. "No," Keith said finally, "but it's finished. And that's enough. What will you do now?" "Take care of Emma. Help her heal. Maybe move somewhere new. Start over. And if there are others? Other networks, other predators." Keith was quiet for a long time. "Then, if I find them, I'll stop them too." 3 months later, Keith and Emma moved to Portland. New city, new schools, new start. Keith got a job with a different logistics company. Emma joined a soccer league and made friends. On Emma's 10th birthday, they had a small party. Just Emma's new friends, Keith's parents who flew out, and Kathleen Pike, who'd become like an aunt to Emma. As they cut the cake, Emma leaned over to Keith. "Daddy, I'm glad we moved here. It feels safer." "You are safe. I promise. I know. She squeezed his hand. Because you're here. Keith watched his daughter laugh with her friends, saw the light returning to her eyes, and thought maybe, just maybe, they'd made it through the darkness. The scars would never fully heal. The memories would never fully fade. But they'd survived. And in surviving, they'd saved others. That had to count for something. That evening, after everyone left, Keith sat alone in his new study. He'd built a new database on his computer, tracking missing children cases across the Pacific Northwest. Old habits. But now he knew what to look for, what patterns to watch for. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Keith almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Rice? You don't know me. My name is Wendell Conrad. I'm a detective with Portland PD. We have a situation, and your name came up as someone who might be able to help. What kind of situation? The kind that involves children who need someone like you. Someone who gives a damn and knows how to fight. Keith looked through the doorway at Emma, who was reading on the couch, safe and whole. He'd sworn this was finished, that he was done fighting. But some fights never really end. Tell me what you need, Keith said. And in the shadows, the war continued. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.